Meera nuzzled his hand. One particular day stood out above the rest. Arjun decided to take Meera on a small adventure, a trip to the beach 2 towns away. He hadn't driven in months. The car still smelled of old coffee and forgotten grief. But that day he cleaned it out, filled the tank, and packed a small bag with water, treats, and Meera's favorite toy, a frayed tennis ball. The drive was quiet, peaceful. Meera stared out the window, her nose pressed to the glass, watching trees blur into streaks of green and brown. When they reached the beach, it was nearly empty. The sky was overcast, but there was no rain, just wind and the soft roar of waves. Arjun took off her leash. She hesitated for a second, then sprinted forward. And for the first time he saw her run. Really run. She kicked up sand with every leap, barked into the open air, chased after her ball, and sometimes after nothing at all. She rolled in the sand, ran to the edge of the water, and returned soaked and panting. Arjun laughed, a full, unrestrained laugh, the kind that cracks the ribs open and lets light in. He ran too, not for exercise, not for escape, but for joy. They ran until both were breathless, until Meera collapsed at his feet, her tongue lolling out, eyes sparkling. He sat beside her, both of them staring at the endless gray-blue ocean. "Thank you," he said softly. Not for any specific thing, just for everything. Back home, life continued in its quiet miracle. Meera grew stronger, her limp all but gone. Her fur gleamed, her tail never stopped wagging. She began to recognize the sound of Arjun's brushstrokes, the jingling of keys, the rattle of the food tin. Arjun, too, changed. He cut his hair, cleaned the apartment, opened windows he had long kept closed. He even began answering phone calls again, first short ones, then longer. He reconnected with an old college friend, said yes to a gallery invitation. He took Meera, with him, of course. The gallery buzzed with color and chatter, but Arjun stood in the corner, anxious. He hadn't been in a room full of strangers since before his parents died, but Meera sat beside him, tail brushing against his shoe. A little girl approached. "Can I pet her?" Arjun nodded, surprised. Meera licked the girl's hand. The girl giggled, then turned to Arjun. "She looks happy." "She is," Arjun replied. "Are you?" He hesitated, looked down at Meera, then back at the girl. "I think I'm learning to be." There were still bad days. Grief doesn't vanish. Some mornings Arjun woke with a weight in his chest he couldn't explain. Some nights he found himself staring at old photographs for hours. Sometimes he still cried, but Meera was always there. She'd climb onto the bed and rest her head on his chest, syncing her heartbeat with his. She would fetch her ball and drop it on his lap as if to say, "Come back to the present. I'm here." And when he painted through tears, she would lie beneath the easel, her presence anchoring him to the ground. Healing wasn't a straight path, but with Meera, it was no longer a lonely one. On the anniversary of his parents' death, Arjun took Meera to their favorite park, the same place where his father used to fly kites and his mother used to hum old Hindi songs. He brought a kite with him that day. He hadn't flown one in years. But the sky was clear and the wind was perfect. He tied the string, held it up, and ran. The kite soared. Meera barked and chased it, leaping and spinning, and Arjun laughed until his sides hurt. The wind carried the colors higher, and for a brief moment, he imagined his parents watching from above, smiling. He sat on the grass, Meera beside him, and whispered, "They would have loved you." She leaned into him, and for the first time in years, he felt whole. That night, he painted the scene, the kite in the sky, Meera mid-leap, and a smiling couple in the background, their forms light and soft, almost like ghosts. He titled it, "We're Still Here." And in his heart, he believed it. Time didn't stop. It never does. It moved gently at first, like a stream in spring, soft, quiet, meandering through days that slowly warmed. But time, in its quiet insistence, began to stretch its fingers through everything. Through Arjun's life, through Meera's fur, through the cracks that once seemed impossible to mend. Seasons shifted. Spring melted into summer. The once dim apartment now smelled of fresh flowers and sunlight. Arjun had opened all the windows. On some days, wind danced through the curtains, carrying laughter from the street below. Meera would sit by the window for hours, ears twitching, eyes soft, watching children run and neighbors water plants. She had grown. Her body had filled out, lean but strong. Her eyes still held that quiet wisdom, but now they sparkled with mischief and joy. The scar on her front leg had faded into a faint line, a reminder of what she had survived. And Arjun, he had changed too. He wasn't the same man who once stared at the floor for hours, who avoided mirrors and unopened mail. Now, he painted regularly, exhibited in small local galleries, and even taught online art classes. His voice, once rough with silence, now carried laughter and sometimes even song when he thought no one was listening. But Meera always listened, and time kept going. Their daily walks became rituals, non-negotiable. Morning and evening, without fail. In summer, they wandered farther, to the lake, to the forest edge, sometimes even to the railway tracks where trains hummed past in blurs of silver and sound. Meera loved the forest most. She would dash between trees, nose buried in the earth, chasing invisible trails. Arjun followed at a slower pace, camera in hand, capturing her joy in frozen frames. He started a photo blog called Meera Moments. Strangers followed, then thousands. Messages poured in from across the world. People moved by the bond, the photos, the quiet love between a man and his dog. One message read, "I lost my father last year. Watching Meera run made me feel like maybe there's still joy left in the world." Arjun cried that night, not out of sadness, but because for the first time, he realized the pain he carried had turned into something meaningful, something that helped others breathe a little easier. As time moved forward, so did memories. One rainy night, not unlike the one when they first met, Arjun found an old box in the back of his closet. He hadn't touched it since the accident. Inside were his parents' belongings, his father's favorite pen, his mother's shawl, a stack of letters tied with a ribbon. Meera sat beside him, silent as always. He unfolded a letter written by his mother. It wasn't anything monumental, just a simple note about dinner plans and reminding him to call home more often. But her handwriting, it carried her voice. Arjun read it aloud. His voice broke halfway through, but Meera placed her head on his knee, anchoring him. "You'd have loved them," he whispered. She looked up, and for a moment, he imagined what it might have been like. His mother slipping Meera scraps under the table, his father trying to pretend he didn't care, only to sneak her treats when no one was looking. They were never going to meet. But somehow, through Arjun, through memory and love they already had. The years blurred gently. Meera turned 3, then 5. With age came maturity. She still chased birds, still wrestled with Arjun's slippers, but her movements became more graceful, more intentional. She listened better than most humans, understanding not just words but emotions, the weight of a sigh, the hesitation in Arjun's voice, the silence that sometimes returned on long, heavy nights. Arjun's world expanded. He held workshops, traveled to nearby towns to teach art therapy at schools and community centers. Every trip he made, Meera came too. People came for the art, but stayed for her. Children would swarm her, hands outstretched, and she would lie down patiently, tail wagging, letting herself be loved. In one workshop, a boy who hadn't spoken in months looked up, met Meera's eyes, and said clearly, "Dog." His mother wept. Later that evening, Arjun held Meera close and whispered, "You're more than a dog, Meera. You're magic." And she wagged her tail like she knew. But time, for all its beauty, also brings change. And change eventually brings the ache of impermanence. It began subtly, a slight hesitation before jumping onto the bed, a longer pause before chasing the ball, small whimpers when getting up after naps. The vet was kind but honest. "She's getting older, Arjun. It's normal, just arthritis. Manageable with care, but it's the beginning of her senior years." Senior years? The words felt foreign, wrong, like they belonged to someone else's story. Meera still looked like the same dog, still bright, still loving, but now with graying fur around her eyes and a limp that came and went like an old song. Arjun did what he always did. He adjusted. He built ramps beside the bed, switched to anti-inflammatory food, bought her a new orthopedic bed, though she still preferred his lap. But in the quiet spaces between their days, he felt it, the shadow of loss beginning to stretch across their horizon. He didn't talk about it, not to her, not to anyone. He just loved her harder. One evening, as they sat beneath their favorite tree at the park, the sun casting long shadows, Arjun said softly, "You know, you were supposed to be temporary." Meera, resting her head on his foot, blinked slowly. "I wasn't ready to love anyone again. But you didn't ask for permission, you just showed up." A pause. The wind stirred the leaves. "And now?" His voice trembled. "I can't imagine a world without you." Meera shifted, placed her paw on his knee, the same paw she had once placed on his chest that first morning, waking him into a new life. He smiled through tears. "I know, we're not there yet." But he could feel it. Time was not pausing. Not even for love. So they made a new promise, unspoken but absolute, to make the most of what remained. The rain fell like a slow, gentle weeping, soft, persistent, and oddly peaceful. It wasn't the kind of rain that people ran from. It was the kind that soaked into your skin and reminded you that you were still alive. The city streets shimmered, with reflections of passing headlights. Umbrellas bloomed like dark flowers, and the occasional honk echoed faintly in the distance. It was just another lonely evening in the world. Arjun sat alone at the far edge of the old bus stop, his coat buttoned all the way to the top, hands jammed into his pockets and his eyes cast downward. He had no reason to be there. He didn't take buses anymore. He had no destination, no urgency, no one waiting for him anywhere. The bench beneath him was cold, but not as cold as the ache in his chest. It had been 8 months since his parents died in a car crash. The grief had not loosened its grip. It had only grown quieter, heavier. The house they once filled with laughter now echoed like a mausoleum. Then came the breakup, the final blow. His fiancée, tired of his silence, and the ghost that grief had turned him into, left with nothing but a note and a single suitcase. Since then, Arjun wandered. Some days he walked aimlessly for hours. Other days he just sat, like today, waiting for nothing, for no one, simply existing. That's when he heard it. A faint rustle, just beneath the bench. He shifted slightly, unsure if it was the wind or something else. Another rustle. Then a soft, muffled whimper. Curious, Arjun bent forward, lifting the edge of the bench with his hand. His breath caught. There, curled into a tight, trembling ball, was a puppy. Tiny, barely a few months old. Her fur was soaked through, matted in places, dirt clinging to her paws. One of her front legs was lifted awkwardly off the ground, and a small cut near her paw bled slowly. But it was her eyes that struck him the most. Wide, glistening, and filled with something that didn't belong in a creature so small. Resignation, not fear, not even hope. Just a quiet acceptance, as if she had given up on being rescued. Arjun froze. He didn't consider himself a dog person. He had never owned one. His life was barely in order, he could barely take care of himself. But something about the way she looked at him, without expectation, without fear, something about those eyes reached inside and touched the shattered pieces of his soul. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. The rain continued, and then slowly, carefully, Arjun slipped off his jacket. He knelt beside the puppy, inching closer, making no sudden movements. She didn't move, didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed locked on his. "I'm not gonna hurt you," he whispered, his voice cracking from disuse. She blinked. Gently, he wrapped the jacket around her fragile body. She didn't resist. She simply sighed, deep, heavy, and let him lift her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her bones delicate, her fur still damp and shivering. Arjun looked around. No one seemed to notice. People passed by, huddled under umbrellas, rushing to warm homes in dry clothes. None of them had seen her. Or maybe they had, and chose not to stop. He held her tighter. That was the moment it happened. That fragile shift in the world, invisible to everyone else but monumental to him. He wasn't alone anymore. Back at his apartment, Arjun lit the heater and gently placed her on an old towel in front of it. She looked around cautiously, her ears perked but not aggressive. He got a bowl of warm water and another of milk, placing them near her. At first, she didn't move, but then slowly she crawled toward the milk and began to lap at it, tiny tongue flicking in and out with quiet urgency. Arjun watched from the couch, his arms resting on his knees, eyes never leaving her. "Guess I can't call you Stray anymore," he murmured. He thought about a name, but nothing felt right, until his eyes drifted to the small wooden sculpture on the shelf, an old statue of Meera, the saint his mother used to adore, the embodiment of love, loyalty, and devotion. "Meera," he whispered. "That's your name." She didn't react, but the name felt right in his mouth. Soft, sacred. Over the next few days, a rhythm began to form. Arjun cleaned her wound, took her to the vet, who told him she was severely malnourished but otherwise would heal with time. He bought food, blankets, a small bed she never used because she preferred curling up on his feet. He found himself talking to her more than he had spoken to anyone in months. "You know, I used to paint," he said one evening, sitting on the floor beside her. "But it felt pointless after everything happened." She tilted her head. "Maybe I'll show you sometime." He smiled weakly. She licked his hand. It wasn't magic, not the kind that fixed everything at once. Grief didn't vanish. Pain didn't disappear. But something inside him softened. He woke up each day with a reason, to feed her, to walk her, to simply sit with her in silence. And slowly, that silence stopped feeling so empty. One rainy night, weeks after he first found her, Arjun found himself staring at a blank canvas. Meera lay beside him, her head resting on his thigh, eyes closed, but ears twitching slightly at every brushstroke. He painted for hours, not because he had to, not for a gallery or a paycheck, but because he wanted to capture her, the way she looked up at him under the bench, the quiet surrender, the unspoken bond, the way her presence filled the air around him like warm light. When he finished, the canvas showed a little puppy in the rain, soaked, bleeding, forgotten, and a pair of hands reaching down from above, jacket open, heart open. It was his story, their story. One morning, Arjun took Meera to the nearby park. The air was crisp, the ground still wet from a night of rain. She walked with a slight limp but refused to be carried anymore. He laughed as she chased after pigeons, clumsy but determined, barking joyfully into the wind. People stopped to smile at them, this quiet man and his loyal companion. "You two look like best friends," one woman said. He smiled. "We are." That evening, as they lay side by side on the couch, Arjun whispered into her fur, "You saved me." She shifted slightly and let out a contented sigh. And in the silence that followed, something shifted permanently in Arjun's chest. A wound that had once been gaping now held a thread, not fully healed, but sewn shut by small, beautiful moments. A thread spun from warm fur, wet noses, and eyes that spoke 1,000 unspoken words. The beginning of forever wasn't loud. It didn't come with trumpets or lights. It came in the rain, in a quiet whimper, in a look that said, I see you, and I choose you. The sun had started to return. After months of gray skies and rain-drenched days, the light now filtered gently through the old lace curtains of Arjun's apartment. The golden beams touched the corners of the room like hesitant fingers, as though even the sun was learning to be gentle again. Much like Arjun himself, Meera had now been with him for nearly 2 months. In those 60 days, his world had reshaped itself quietly, one small, almost invisible moment at a time. It began with a single habit. Morning walks. Arjun, who once had no reason to leave the house, now woke before the alarm. Every day at sunrise, Meera would trot to the side of his bed, placing a single paw on his chest. Her eyes gleamed with excitement and expectation. He tried to ignore her the first few days, grumbling, turning away. But she'd gently paw him, again soft and insistent. Eventually he gave in. He would throw on a sweatshirt, grab the leash, though she barely needed it, and step outside. The streets were still sleepy at that hour. Birds chirped in trees that had nearly forgotten song. The bakery 2 blocks away always smelled of warm dough and sugar. Meera would sniff every corner, sometimes stopping just to look up at Arjun and wag her tail as if to say, "Isn't this wonderful?" And it was. He didn't know it at the time, but those walks were saving him. Back home, Meera would curl up at his feet as he worked. Arjun had slowly begun taking small freelance projects again. Illustrations, small paintings, graphic layouts. Nothing too big. But even the act of holding a pencil, of watching color return to white paper, made him feel human again. Meera became his silent studio partner. She had her own spot near the window, on a patch of warm sunlight, always watching him. Sometimes she'd crawl over and place her paw on his sketch pad, smudging his lines with playful clumsiness. Other times she'd fall asleep to the scratch of his pencil, her breathing a soft rhythm beside his heart. One afternoon while working, on a painting for a client, a portrait of a couple with their golden retriever, Arjun paused. His hands froze mid-brushstroke. He stared at the dog on the canvas and then at Meera, asleep beside his chair. Without thinking, he dipped the brush into warm brown and added a pair of familiar eyes to the painting. Not the dog in the reference photo, but Meera's. He didn't correct it. He didn't even tell the client. That was the moment he realized something. Meera had entered his soul, not like a visitor, but like someone who had always been there, just waiting for the right time to appear. Over time, Arjun began to speak more, not to people, not yet, but to Meera. He'd talk to her while chopping vegetables, while fixing the broken cupboard door, while folding laundry. Sometimes he'd tell her about his parents, how his mother always danced in the kitchen, or how his father used to build paper airplanes on Sundays. Sometimes he spoke of his ex, the way love had faded without warning, like light slipping beneath a closed door. Meera never interrupted. She never judged. She just listened, with her ears perked and her eyes wide, absorbing every syllable like scripture. One night, as they sat on the balcony watching the rain return briefly, Arjun whispered, "I don't know if I'm better, but I'm less broken." Every walk became a memory in the making. Arjun carried her when she tired, which happened more often now. He painted her almost daily, sleeping, eating, blinking, breathing. He wanted to capture every expression, every quirk. He made a scrapbook, titled "For When I Forget." Inside were photos, drawings, pressed flowers from walks, ticket stubs from beach trips, and little journal entries. April 3rd. Meera barked at the mirror again. Still doesn't trust her own reflection. I love her for it. May 19th. First swim in months. She was slow but determined. So was I. June 2nd. Woke up with her curled into my back. Like always. Like forever. He didn't know who the book was for. Maybe himself. Maybe Meera. Maybe for the world when it no longer had her. But he filled every page. And one day, one quiet, unremarkable day, he woke up to find Meera not beside him. He panicked at first, until he saw her sitting at the balcony, staring into the sky. The sun was just rising, casting the world in that pale orange glow that made everything look softer. He sat beside her. They watched the world wake up in silence. He placed his hand gently on her back, and she leaned into him, just a little. That moment, simple, silent, infinite, was more than a memory. It was a prayer, a reminder that love, even borrowed love, even love with an expiration date, was worth everything. The morning felt normal. That was the strange part, how ordinary it all was. The sun spilled gently over the windowsill, lighting the room with a golden warmth. Arjun stirred slowly under the covers. Meera wasn't in bed, but that wasn't unusual anymore. As she aged, she often got up earlier, padding softly into the kitchen, sitting by the door waiting for their walk. Arjun yawned, rubbed the sleep from his eyes, and called out, "Meera girl, you ready?" Silence. He frowned, sat up, and swung his legs to the floor. Then came the sound, a soft whimper, faint, like a whisper wrapped in pain. His heart jumped. He rushed into the kitchen. There she was, curled up by the back door, her body tense. Her breathing was shallow, and her eyes, though open, seemed clouded. Not the usual brightness. Not the sparkle that always waited for him. "Meera?" He knelt, gently placing a hand on her back. She flinched. That was the first sign. The way she pulled away. The way her body, once so eager to be touched, now recoiled slightly, reluctantly from even the softest gesture. Panic twisted in his gut. He examined her gently, whispering calming words, brushing her fur aside with trembling fingers. Her stomach felt tight. Her legs were trembling ever so slightly. She didn't bark. She didn't move. She just looked up at him with eyes that seemed to say, "Something's wrong. I don't know what." And in that moment, neither did he. The vet appointment was immediate. Arjun wrapped her in a blanket and carried her like he used to when she was a limp, half-starved rescue. His arms ached more now. He was older too, but he didn't care. The car ride was silent, no breeze-blown ears or eager nose pressed to the window. Meera simply lay in the passenger seat, her head resting on a folded towel, her breath shallow. Arjun gripped the steering wheel like a lifeline. The vet's office smelled the same: antiseptic, lavender, faint anxiety. Dr. Rhea, who had known Meera since the beginning, knelt down beside her without speaking. She didn't need to ask what was wrong. She could see it. "Let's run some tests," she said gently. Blood work, x-rays, a mild sedative to keep Meera calm. Arjun paced the waiting room, staring at the same poster he always did. "They might not speak, but they tell us everything." He hated that poster. An hour passed, then another. Finally, Dr. Rhea returned, a quiet heaviness in her eyes. He knew before she even opened her mouth. "She's showing early signs of organ stress," she said. "Kidney function is declining, some fluid buildup in the abdomen. There's also a mass near her liver." Arjun sat very still. "Is it cancer?" "We don't know yet. It could be benign, but her age and the symptoms." She paused. "We'll need to monitor closely. Start medication, special diet, pain management, maybe surgery if it progresses." He nodded slowly, but the words were smoke. She touched his arm. "She's not in critical condition yet, Arjun. You've caught this early. But this is the first sign, the beginning of a different chapter. Different, darker, harder." He closed his eyes. "I don't want to lose her," he said softly. "I know." She handed him a list of medications and instructions. He stared at the paper as if reading a foreign language. Back home, Meera rested on the rug beside the couch, wrapped in her blanket. She was drowsy from the sedative, her breathing a soft wheeze, but her eyes followed Arjun as he moved around the apartment in silence. He didn't paint that day. He sat beside her, one hand resting gently on her paw, his other hand stroking the gray hairs around her muzzle. He whispered stories to her, of the first day they met, of the beach, the kite, the little boy who said, "Dog." Her eyes fluttered, and he imagined her remembering with him. They were beginning a new chapter now, one not defined by recovery or joy, but by time running out. In the following days, Arjun became obsessed with care. He transformed the apartment. Rugs for traction, food bowls elevated to reduce joint strain, a whiteboard checklist for meds and meals and vet updates. He learned to read Meera's eyes, to interpret every breath, every twitch, every change in behavior. He stopped taking commissions, postponed workshops. Nothing mattered more than Meera. She improved slightly with the medication, walked better, ate more, even barked once when the neighbor's cat crossed the balcony railing. But the joy was different now, quieter, tempered. Every time she wagged her tail, Arjun felt both relief and dread, because he now knew what that wag meant. It meant today was okay. It didn't promise tomorrow. One night, Arjun dreamt of her running. She was young again, bounding through fields, her body strong and fast. He called her name and she turned, smiling the way dogs do. Eyes wide, ears flying, pure light. But she didn't run toward him. She ran into a fog, chasing something he couldn't see. He woke with tears on his face. Meera was sleeping beside him, breathing softly. He curled around her, arms wrapped protectively, trying to pull her back from whatever place his mind had conjured. "I'm not ready," he whispered. Her ear twitched. Time continued, but now it moved with a heaviness. Each morning, Arjun checked if she was still breathing. Each night he kissed her forehead like a parent afraid to say goodbye. He took hundreds of pictures, trying to capture everything: the tilt of her head, the curve of her tail, the way she looked at him when he poured food into her bowl. He started painting again, but this time it wasn't art for galleries or clients. It was Meera, over and over, sleeping, watching, waiting, a series he called The Time Between. Each canvas was a love letter, a prayer, a fear, and he didn't stop. Then came the second sign. It was subtle. Meera stood up one morning and collapsed. Just like that. Her back legs buckled. She whimpered once, then looked up at him in confusion, as if her own body had betrayed her. Arjun rushed to her, held her gently, stroked her head. She didn't try to rise again for hours. The vet confirmed it: muscle atrophy, nerve damage. Nothing unexpected, given her condition. But now it was clear. They were in the final chapter. Not days, not weeks, perhaps a few months if lucky. But Meera's time was gently folding in on itself. The fire was flickering. So Arjun made a choice. He stopped mourning early, stopped counting days, and started living each one like it was their last. Because eventually one of them would be. They returned to every place they loved: the park bench under the banyan tree, the lake with the stone path, the beach with the salt-stained breeze. Arjun carried her when she was too tired to walk. He didn't care who stared. He sang to her on those journeys, off-key lullabies, silly made-up songs, memories wrapped in melody. And Meera, she watched him with endless love. Even tired, even weak, she never stopped looking at him like he was her whole world, because he was, and she was his. It was a Tuesday, ordinary by all measures. The sun rose, the world stirred, traffic moved outside their window. But for Arjun, time had begun to slow into something fragile, like glass balancing on the edge of a shelf. Meera didn't get up that morning, not even when the kettle whistled or when the doorbell rang. She opened her eyes and looked at him, but she didn't try to rise. Her tail gave a soft twitch, barely more than a breath of motion. Arjun knelt beside her, brushing the graying fur on her head. "Tired, girl?" She blinked slowly. There was no pain in her eyes, at least none he could see. But the light that once danced there now shimmered dimly like a candle burning low. And for the first time, Arjun realized it wasn't just that she was sick, she was preparing. The vet confirmed what he already knew in his heart. "Her organs are starting to shut down," Dr. Rhea said gently. "She's in the final stages now. It could be days, maybe a week. It's hard to say, but this is it." There were more medications offered, more palliative options. But Arjun barely heard them. He simply nodded, holding Meera's leash tightly in both hands, though she was curled in his lap, her head resting softly against his chest. "I don't want her to suffer," he said, voice trembling. "She trusts you," Rhea said. "She'll tell you when it's time." He nodded again, but he wasn't ready. They went home, and the days that followed were unlike anything Arjun had experienced. Not just quiet, but suspended in a kind of sacred stillness. He stopped painting. He stopped answering calls. The world outside dimmed. Inside their apartment, time was counted not in minutes but in heartbeats. In the rustle of blankets, the shallow rhythm of Meera's breathing, the soft click of her nails on the floor as she moved, less and less each day. Arjun adjusted to her pace. He carried her to the balcony every morning so she could feel the sun on her fur. He sat beside her as she napped, whispering stories, singing lullabies, brushing her coat gently. Every moment mattered now. Even the silence was sacred. On Thursday, a letter arrived. It was from a child in another city, one of many who had followed the Meera Moments blog over the years. The child had drawn a picture, Meera flying through the clouds, a golden crown on her head, a boy holding her leash as they soared together. The note read, "If Meera ever goes to heaven, she'll be the queen of the sky." Arjun cried for an hour, then he hung the drawing above her bed. As Meera grew weaker, something in Arjun grew stronger. A stillness, a quiet kind of bravery. He didn't collapse the way he once did. He didn't hide or retreat. He stayed present, even in the pain, even as her body betrayed her more each day, losing control of her bladder, needing to be carried to eat or drink. He stayed by her side, tender, patient, endlessly loving. He wiped her mouth with warm towels. He whispered, "You're doing so good, Meera, so strong." And she tried for him. Even as her body gave way, her spirit held on like a thread of light refusing to dim. One night the air turned cold unexpectedly. Arjun lit a candle and pulled a blanket over them both on the couch. Meera rested her head on his chest, and he could feel how thin she'd become. Her bones, once padded with youth and strength, now pressed gently through skin. He told her stories she'd heard 1,000 times. "Remember the time we went to the beach, and you stole that kid's sandwich?" Her tail gave a faint wag. Or, "That summer we slept under the stars and you barked at fireflies all night?" Her eyes flickered. He placed his forehead to hers. "Thank you," he whispered. For every second, she licked his cheek once, slow, deliberate, then closed her eyes. The next morning she didn't wake up easily. Her breathing was labored, her body limp. Arjun held her in his arms, rocking gently, panic threatening to choke him. Dr. Rhea came to the apartment. After examining her, she gave Arjun a long look. "It's time," she said softly. "She's hanging on for you. But she's ready." Arjun pressed his forehead to Meera's side, tears falling freely. "I can't," he whispered. "Not yet. She doesn't want to go," Rhea said gently, "but she's tired. She needs your permission." That evening, Arjun carried Meera to the park one last time. She couldn't walk anymore, so he held her close to his chest, wrapped in the same blanket from years ago, the one she'd chewed holes in as a puppy. They sat under the banyan tree, the same one where she'd once chased birds and rolled in the dirt, the same place where he'd cried after a bad dream, and she had licked the tears from his cheeks. The wind moved gently through the leaves. Arjun whispered, "Do you remember our first walk?" Meera didn't move, but he could feel her breath slow and soft. "You found me when I was lost. You made me live again." He closed his eyes. "You've done enough, Meera. You can rest now." For a long time, they sat in silence, the sky above turning a deep orange. Then, very faintly, her tail moved, one last wag, one last, "I know." They returned home together. Ria came later that night, bringing peace with her. She explained everything gently, softly, how it would be quick, how Meera wouldn't feel pain. Arjun held her on the floor, cradling her in his arms, heart pounding. Louder than the silence, Ria asked if he was ready. He nodded, though his lips trembled. "Okay," she whispered. As the medicine began to take hold, Meera looked up at him. And even in her fading eyes, he saw the puppy she'd once been, the fighter, the survivor, the light that saved him. He smiled through tears. "I'll find you again," he whispered. "In dreams, in paintings, in the air." Her breath slowed, then stopped. She was gone. Just like that. A stillness unlike any other filled the room. Ria quietly packed her things and left, giving Arjun the time he needed. He didn't cry at first. He just sat, holding her body, tracing the shape of her ear, her paw, memorizing her even though he already knew every part. Then, the sobs came. Not like a storm, but like a wave. Deep, breaking slowly over the shore. In the days that followed, the apartment felt impossibly quiet. No clicking of paws on the floor. No soft snores from the corner. No warm body curled into his side. Arjun didn't know how to be alone anymore. Not truly, not after years of sharing every breath with her, but grief, like love, carves space. So he painted, not to escape, but to remember. He created a series called The Last Days of the Sun. Each painting captured Meera in her final moments, her resting under the banyan tree, her lying in his arms, her eyes looking up, full of peace. The world responded with aching hearts. Letters poured in. Stories from strangers who had lost their dogs, their cats, their soulmates in fur. His inbox became a gallery of love and mourning, and he realized Meera wasn't gone. She was everywhere now. He placed her ashes in a small urn on the windowsill, beside a framed photo of them on the beach. Every morning he lit a candle and whispered, "Good morning, girl." Every night he told her, "I love you." Time didn't stop. It never does. But it softened, and so did the ache. It had been 13 days since Meera passed. 13 sunrises, 13 quiet evenings, where Arjun lit a candle and whispered, "Good night, girl," into the emptiness of his home. The apartment didn't feel like a home anymore, not without the sound of paws on hardwood floors, not without the little sigh Meera made before curling up in her bed. Her blanket still lay in the corner, unwashed, untouched. Arjun couldn't bring himself to fold it. He tried to move through the motions, eat, shower, answer messages, but everything felt mechanical. His hands painted nothing. His mind floated between days, lost in a fog of memory and silence. The world moved on. But he stood still. Everywhere he looked, Meera was there. The leash by the door, still coiled like she'd be needing it any minute. The half-eaten bag of treats in the cupboard, her favorite brand. The one he had to order online because she wouldn't touch anything else. The tennis ball beneath the couch. The photo albums on the shelf, filled with years of laughter and wagging tails. He couldn't escape her presence. But worse still was the absence. No cold nose nuzzling his palm when he came home. No eager eyes at breakfast. No wait beside him at night. Just space. Too much space. His friends reached out. Ria checked in regularly, her messages warm and understanding. "Take your time," she always said. Some of his students sent flowers, a few painted portraits of Meera in tribute, gifts from hearts that had been touched by her story. But Arjun couldn't answer them. He didn't want to talk about her. He didn't want to not talk about her. So, he disappeared into his grief. Each day, he sat by the window with a cup of untouched tea, watching birds hop along the balcony railing. One day he caught himself whispering. She would have barked at them, and the tears came again. A week later he tried to paint. He sat before a blank canvas and stared at it for an hour. His hands hovered over the brush, But when he tried to move, nothing came. The brush fell from his fingers. He pressed his forehead to the canvas and sobbed. Because how do you paint when the color has left your world? Then on the 19th day, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. Not a lightning bolt or epiphany, just a breeze. A soft wind through the window, and a single leaf fluttered in, spiraling gently down from the balcony railing, landing right beside Meera's urn. Arjun stared at it. It was shaped like a paw print. No, not exactly, but close enough. And somehow it felt like a message. He picked up the leaf, held it in his palm, and for the first time in days, smiled. A small smile. Fragile, but real. That evening, he sat by her urn and spoke aloud. I don't know what to do without you, Meera. He waited, hoping the silence would answer him. It didn't, but he kept speaking. I miss you. So much. I miss your breath, your warmth, your eyes. I don't know how to fill this space you left behind. He closed his eyes, tears slipping down. But I think, yeah, maybe you'd want me to try. So he tried slowly. He began by sorting her things, not to throw away, but to remember. He made a memory box, her collar, her favorite toy, her first tag, the frayed leash from their early days. Every item told a story. Every story brought a tear and a smile. He started writing letters to her. He kept them in a notebook titled, To the One Who Saved Me. And finally, after nearly a month, he picked up a brush. The painting didn't start as Meera. It was just color. Streaks of golden light, blurred shapes, warm tones. It felt like sunrise, like peace. He didn't think. He let his hands move. When he stepped back, he realized it was a painting of their last morning together. Meera curled in his arms, the sun rising behind them. He cried again, but it was a different kind of crying. Not the shattering grief of loss, but the aching beauty of memory. He started a new project, a series called After Meera. It wasn't about her death. It was about what she left behind. Hope, love, healing, growth. Each painting was a moment. The paw-shaped leaf, the birds on the railing, the empty leash hanging beside the door like a quiet promise. The art went viral, online. Thousands of people from around the world wrote to him. Some sent photos of their pets who had passed. Others shared their grief, their gratitude, their own Meeras. And Arjun read every word. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. In his loss, one letter stood out. It was from a woman named Kavya in the mountains of Himachal Pradesh. She ran a shelter for aging and abandoned dogs. She wrote, I followed your journey with Meera from the start. I cried reading about her. I cried more seeing your paintings after she passed. I know how hard it is, but I want to tell you something. Sometimes when one dog leaves, they leave space for another who needs saving. I have a little girl here. Her name is Tara. She's blind. She doesn't trust people, but she reminds me of Meera when you found her. If you ever want to meet her, we'd be honored. Arjun read the letter 3 times, then he set it aside. He wasn't ready, not yet, but the seed had been planted, and days passed, and the silence of the apartment began to feel less comforting and more suffocating. He caught himself talking to Meera's urn. Do you think she'd like me? He asked once. The wind stirred the curtains. He smiled. I'll go meet her, he said. A week later, Arjun boarded a bus heading north. The road wound through valleys, past rivers and misty cliffs. He carried Meera's urn in a small satchel, pressed close to his chest. It felt right to bring her. She'd never seen the mountains. The shelter was simple, peaceful. A cluster of cottages surrounded by pine trees and crisp mountain air. Kavya greeted him warmly, her eyes kind and knowing. Tara's been waiting, she said. And there she was, small, thin, curled beneath a porch chair, ears twitching. She didn't move when Arjun approached, didn't bark, didn't growl, just turned her head slightly. Sensing his presence, he knelt quietly, "Hi," he whispered. She flinched at his voice but didn't run. He extended a hand. She sniffed cautiously, and after a long, still moment she stepped forward and pressed her nose gently against his palm. Arjun's breath caught. Something opened in his chest, not to replace Meera, but because of her. He stayed for 3 days. In that time, Tara began to follow him, slowly, tentatively. She never strayed too close, but she never strayed too far either. At night, she lay near his door. By the 3rd morning, she let him brush her. He didn't take her home. Not yet, but he left with a promise. "I'll be back," he told her. When Arjun returned to the city, something was different. The apartment was still quiet, but now it felt like a waiting place, a place between goodbyes and new beginnings. He opened the windows wide. He let the wind in, and he whispered to Meera, "Thank you for leading me here. I think I'm ready to love again." It had been almost a year, 361 days to be exact, since Meera's soft breath had left the world, since Arjun had held her for the last time, whispering promises into her fading ears, swearing he'd never forget. He hadn't. Not for a single day. Her presence still lingered in everything, in the paintings he created, in the letters he continued to write, in the way he paused before opening the front door, half expecting to see her bounding toward him. Grief had softened, as grief often does. But love, true love, never dulled. And so he had spent the year building something she would have been proud of. The idea had come one night, quiet and slow, as he stared at the empty canvas. He'd painted dozens of pieces since Meera's passing. Some sold, some were donated. All of them carried her spirit, her smile, her strength, her light, but it didn't feel like enough. One evening, as he read yet another letter from someone whose life had been touched by Meera's story, the thought bloomed, what if this became something more? Not just art, not just memory, but a movement. He called it Meera's Light. At first, it was just a website, a place where people could share stories of their pets, their loss, their love. He uploaded every painting he'd done of Meera, along with journal entries, video clips, and the famous beach photo. Arjun with his paint-covered shirt, Meera mid-leap, mouth open in a joyful bark. The site exploded. People from around the world sent in their own tributes, photos, poems, drawings. Some uploaded videos of their final walks or the last meal their dog refused to eat. Others wrote messages addressed to the stars. The site became a sanctuary, a space for healing, and that gave him another idea. Arjun started working with local shelters, especially those that took in elderly or traumatized dogs. The ones most people overlooked, the ones like Meera. He gave free art classes to children, encouraging them to draw their pets or paint their grief. He donated his work to raise funds for medical care and food. He hosted exhibitions titled Love in Paw Prints. And soon, Meera's Light became a foundation, not just in name, but in action. They started a project called the Home Again Initiative, which paired senior dogs with senior citizens, offering companionship to both. Love doesn't come with a time limit, the tagline read. That was Meera's legacy. On the first anniversary of her passing, Arjun planned something different, a tribute, a public one, something that could live in the world the way she had lived in his, fully, loudly, beautifully. He decided to unveil a mural, but not just any mural, a wall-sized, breathtaking piece that would tell Meera's entire story, her journey from the streets to his arms, from silence to songs, from survival to saving others. He chose a wall at the city's central community park, the same park where Meera had learned to trust the world again. It felt right. The mural would face the sunrise, just like Meera always had. The days leading up to the event were a whirlwind. Volunteers came from everywhere, friends, fans, fellow artists. The media caught wind of the story and local news outlets started covering the preparation. But Arjun didn't care about attention. He cared about truth. Every color, every brushstroke mattered. He painted Meera not as just a dog, but as a soul. Running across fields of memory, swimming through oceans of grief, resting in arms of love. At the center of the mural, he painted the final moment, her head on his chest, her eyes closed in peace, the wind dancing around them like a quiet goodbye. It took 12 days. On the 13th morning, the same number of days it had taken him to say goodbye a year ago, the mural was done. The unveiling was scheduled for Sunday morning, just before sunrise, exactly 1 year to the day. Arjun didn't sleep the night before. He sat beside Meera's urn, dressed in the same worn shirt from the beach photo, paint stains, faded but still visible. He whispered, "It's for you, all of this, always." When he arrived at the park, a crowd had already gathered, hundreds of people, children holding dogs, old men in wheelchairs with tiny terriers on their laps, artists, reporters, mothers holding printed photos of pets they'd lost. And there, near the front, sat Kavya. Beside her was Tara, the blind rescue dog Arjun had met months ago in Himachal. She wasn't blind anymore. After a risky but successful surgery funded by Meera's Light, Tara had regained partial vision, enough to see shapes, shadows, and perhaps love. When Arjun called her name, she trotted forward, tail wagging, head tilted. She recognized his voice. He knelt down, arms open, and for the first time, Tara ran into them. The mayor gave a short speech. Then a young girl recited a poem she'd written after losing her puppy the month before. Arjun stood last. He didn't speak from a script. He didn't need to. "I lost Meera 1 year ago today," he began, voice clear and steady. "But in many ways I found her again, everywhere." He gestured to the wall behind him. "In your stories, in your tears, in your courage to love again." He paused, swallowing hard. "Meera wasn't just my dog. She was my reason to live. And now she's my reason to give." He turned to the mural. "This is for her, but it's also for you, for anyone who's ever loved and lost, and still chooses to open their heart again." Then, with a single tug of the cloth, he unveiled the mural. Gasps filled the air. Then silence. Then applause. Not the loud, rowdy kind, but soft, reverent, like clapping for a symphony that had ended with a single perfect note. Afterward, people approached him quietly. Some hugged him. Others simply touched his arm and nodded as if to say, "I understand. I carry this too." One little boy whispered, "I want to paint my dog too. He died in February." Arjun smiled, knelt, and said, "Then let's paint him. Together." As the sun climbed higher, Arjun stepped back and stood before the mural alone. Tara sat beside him. He looked at the central image, Meera, resting peacefully in his arms wrapped in light. He whispered, "I hope I did you justice." And in that moment, a breeze rustled the trees. The leaves danced, and he knew she was there, watching, proud. A gentle rain tapped against the window pane, soft as breath. It had been 15 months since Meera passed, 15 months since Arjun had buried his heart in memory and grown something beautiful from the pain. A mural, a movement, a mission. But even in all of that, he still paused at the foot of her bed each morning. Still spoke to her photo before leaving the house. Still kept her collar on the mantle, its worn leather looped like a full circle. Meera was gone, but somehow she was everywhere. Tara had now been living with Arjun for 8 months. Her steps were still cautious, but her trust had bloomed in silent, magnificent ways. She no longer flinched when the world moved quickly. She no longer hid in corners during storms. She had learned what it meant to be loved, fully, quietly, and without condition. She was no Meera, and Arjun didn't want her to be. Tara was herself, beautifully broken in new ways, healed in others, gentle, observant, loyal. She followed him from room to room now, She would curl beneath his easel when he painted, her breathing steady and grounding. And sometimes, just sometimes, Arjun would catch her staring at Meera's photo, as if she knew, as if she understood who paved the path before her.